everybody out there in Bourbon Real Talk land. Randy Sullivan here with a very special guest, Ty Phelps from Andalusia Distilling. Is it distilling or distillery?
Andalusia Whiskey Company is what we like.
Okay, yeah. Andalusia Whiskey Company. And we are just outside of Dripping Springs, right?
Yeah, Dripping Springs, kind of Blanco, in the heart of the Texas Hill Country.
Hill Country, it's beautiful out here. Facility is amazing. And we're going to talk a little bit about how insane you have to be to decide to start a spirits production company in the state of Texas. Facts. And it's going to be a wild ride. We do have some of Ty's extremely interesting whiskeys to go through. So we'll start off with this first one. So your whiskey is 100% malted barley, right?
Correct. Yep. We only use malted barley as our grain. We don't use any corn or rye or wheat. And that just goes back to, one, the whiskeys we like, but also kind of the equipment that we have now really can only handle that kind of whiskey production.
So I want to go through the tasting notes of your three main products. So this one is just called...
It's the Andalusia Triple Distilled.
Triple Distilled.
It's the most similar to an Irish whiskey. You know, we won't want to call it an Irish whiskey. Obviously, Irish whiskeys come from Ireland. If this was made in Ireland, it would meet all of their qualifications there. So we're really trying to stick with tradition.
Well, it's got a very interesting sweet nose on it. Mm-hmm. I'm getting definitely honey, ton of honey component.
And it'll be a little more flavor and a little more barrel character too than probably your average Jameson or some of your lighter bodied Irish whiskeys for sure.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking for a little more body and flavor. Even though it is a light whiskey, being an Irish style whiskey, we still wanted it to be flavorful.
Light whiskey in that it's light, not in the light whiskey category.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is triple distilled, right?
It is. Yep. So it gets 3 unique passes through the still. We've got a very basic copper pot still. And so they're really trying to get those rich, full flavored whiskeys.
Yeah. Yeah. So this has, and I loved eating this when I was a kid. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I had to stop eating it because, 1, the calories, and 2, because it would destroy the roof of my mouth. Mm-hmm. I am tasting Captain Crunch cereal all over in this, and I love it.
That's a sweet, malty cereal that's just got all those nice grainy flavors.
Yeah.
But kind of candy-like, though, at the same time.
My grandmother used to keep malt balls around.
There you go.
And that's the sweetness that I'm getting on this.
Mm-hmm. Which, the primary ingredient in those is going to be malted barley.
And which one are you tasting?
So I'm also tasting the triple distilled with you, but I've jumped ahead a little bit, and I'm tasting the sherry finished version of those.
Gotcha. So you guys have a sherry finish series that's distillery only, correct?
Correct. Yep. We've got the 3 whiskeys that we'll be tasting today, all in their own unique sherry barrel. And then we've released those in a set at cask strength, and that's what you see right here.
Gotcha. And so the second one here, you guys do a peated whiskey as well.
We do, yeah. And we do all of our own peating in-house. We really want to have as much control over everything as we can here, and that includes our smoking. And so we already had the smokehouse built in Stryker in mind, and we'll get to that one in a minute. But the Revenant Oak gave us an opportunity to do our own peating. We order peat from Ireland. We burn the peat in the smokehouse. And then after about 24 hours of smoking, that grain picks up that peaty flavor, which will follow all the way through the whiskey. So it's allows us to do our own levels of peat, and then our own regions. We can get different peat from different regions, and which will be vastly different in flavor.
Yeah, and this is Irish
it is,
peat?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're getting Irish peat from the Capabon area of Ireland. And there's not a lot of peat available to us. We're really trying all the different varieties that we can get. But right now, the Irish is really our preferred peat.
Yeah, and I can tell you, you definitely taste the peat in it, but it's not overwhelming. It's complementary to the other flavors.
We like to say it's not a face melter. It's not one of the, and those are great whiskeys. The Ardbeg, the Laphroaig, the Lagavulin, those are fantastic, but definitely not going for something that aggressive. I'd say light to moderate peat level in general on the peaty scale. It's definitely there. You're not going to you're not going to mistake it. But I think it's well balanced with other flavors in the whiskey as opposed to being a dominant force.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm tasting all the same flavors than in the triple distilled in this, but just with that smokiness integrated into each layer of flavor.
Kind of a creme brulee sometimes, kind of a sweet caramel dessert, but then with that nice dry smoke of the peat as well.
Yeah. And so then the third whiskey is Stryker. And this one is smoked with mesquite?
With hardwoods, yeah. So the majority of the wood is going to be oak, a little bit of apple, a little bit of mesquite wood. Mm-hmm. We layer woods for flavoring effects. And we're looking for much more of a Texas barbecue flavor of smoke versus that peat, dry flavor of smoke that you most often associate with Scotch.
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely, I mean, when I took my son camping and we went around and we gathered up all of the scrub oak that had, fallen off the tree, and that's what we cooked our food on and all of that, those sweet oak and tobacco characteristics coming through strong on this one.
Tobacco, the dark leather, or the kind of the leathery smell and aroma, and then that kind of sweet bacon barbecue smoke versus I feel peat is kind of a dry phenolic smoke.
Sure.
And I feel this is a more of a sweet.
Yeah.
And think of burnt ends or bacon.
Yeah.
But then also kind of campfire. And not the brand, but the actual fire.
Sure.
And so getting that classic kind of barbecue smoke.
Sure. And this is a little more subdued than like Balcones Brimstone, which is a little over the limit for me.
Yep.
This to me is a whole lot more approachable and probably really food friendly.
Definitely inspired in part by Brimstone. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think that whiskey has inspired a lot of different cool whiskeys, but no, we definitely did not try to go for the intensity level. Yeah, they do a different process, which does not involve smoking grain, and so they're able to get a lot more smoke in there than what we do. But it's also a different flavor of smoke due to their technique.
Yeah.
And we're kind of sticking with traditional smoke and malt and something a little more balanced. I love blending Brimstone with things because it just dominates.
Sure.
Whatever you're blending it with. So it really makes your bottle of Brimstone go a lot further.
Yeah.
It's great.
I had my bottle for years, and I used to do these educational tastings at my house. Mm-hmm. And that was always the last whiskey we would taste. Definitely. And I called it the palate wrecker.
Definitely.
I'm just like, look, tomorrow morning when you're brushing your teeth, the Brimstone's going to be like, get out of here, mint toothpaste, because I'm the boss
still
now.
Still here, still dominating. Yeah,
I'm the captain now.
Yeah. I'll often blend it with just if I have a basic bourbon or something, I'm not real crazy about. I'll blend it.
Throw a little in there,
and then the Brimstone just dominates. Still, it's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'm sure Jared doesn't want to hear that, but yeah.
Well, he knows it's an intense whiskey.
Yeah, they know for sure. Yeah,
sure. So I always find it interesting, the path to becoming a spirits producer in the state of Texas, where if any of you have listened to my podcast, the regulatory environment is not that friendly towards spirits production.
Right.
So in this same area, you have wine producers that are thriving without a wholesaler. They sell 100% of their product to people that they meet through tourism. And some of those companies are enormous companies, $20 million or more per year in gross sales. Yep. That's pretty large for a small production facility. And you can't do that here in the state of Texas because you're limited in the amount of spirits that you can sell to individuals in the distillery. And at this point, it's pretty obvious that the reason why it's that way is simply because the distributors / wholesalers have a more powerful lobby than the Texas producers do.
Correct.
Along with the retailers. There's no protection for the consuming public in having them involved. They don't taste the whiskey. They don't test the whiskey. They don't send it to a lab, so on and so forth. So I wanted to go all the way back. Do you remember the first time that you had a drink in your life?
Wow. Yeah, I think I do. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell the story?
I can. Yeah. No, it was the Pearl Light in the back of the fridge that my family kept for guests. And it was, my good friend, Tony Alanya. We were probably about 12 maybe at the time. Snuck one of those cans of Pearl Light and took it to our fort and busted it open. And it was the awfulest experience I ever had in my life. part of that was the fact we were 12, and part of that is it was Pearl Light.
Yeah,
So,
it's
yeah.
not the best
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. And so, was your home a home that, the drinking of alcohol was taught as something that you could do responsibly, or
Yeah,
was it
not at
kind of
all.
taboo?
Not at all. It was. Yeah, I grew up in a Southern Baptist home. My father's actually a Southern Baptist minister up in Georgetown today,
Okay,
and they're very supportive and awesome folks. And so
but
it's
they don't
funny.
drink at all.
They don't really, no, but he'll bring friends in from the church for a cocktail. We jokingly say one at a time, obviously,
Right.
because they don't want each other to know they all drink. But yeah, no, it's they've been very supportive. But yeah, I grew up in a household without alcohol, and so getting out of I had a kind of an economics finance background, but through culinary school ended up in craft beer.
Mm.
And that was really the big bridge for me. Culinary school was the bridge to something more creative and hands-on, and then brewing was eventually my bridge to whiskey.
That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I find it happens an awful lot that people that are extremely involved in either the spirits industry or in the hobby of whiskey came from households that were basically,
Really?
no-fly zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And I don't know if just the curiosity of reaching out and all that. And for me, it wasn't that way. Like my mother, when I was growing up, she said, if you want to drink, just let me know. And when I go to the store, I'll get you what you want. You just have to drink it here. And I was like, I'm not going to sit around and drink with all of you old fogies.
Sounds like fun. Yeah.
Right. And so I never drank. I didn't drink till I was like, not never, but
Sure.
I didn't really start drinking regularly until I was in my late 20s, because it was never like an exciting thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
But, it turns out if you're a Baptist minister and, you put the kibosh and all that, your son will turn out to be a distiller.
Well, then it seems so interesting, right?
Right.
If you've been around it your whole life, and if they're really nerding out about it, well, that's the last thing you would want to do is what your folks are doing.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it was a whole new world that I'd never really been exposed to. And so there were things to be interested in I didn't know anything about. And so,
Yeah,
absolutely, I'm sure that played a part of it for sure.
So you live here on property. How many acres do you have?
So we have 120 acres here on the farm. It's a family-owned farm that my wife and I purchased a section of to open the distillery. We're kind of the caretakers of the whole farm. We raise sheep and cattle and chickens, and we've got a llama. And so those are all running around on the property. And we devoted 3 acres to set aside for the distillery.
Gotcha. And whose family was it? Your family?
It's mine. It's my parents that own the rest of the ranch here.
Gotcha. Very interesting. And so you are married.
I am.
You have any kids?
We don't.
Okay. And how long have you been married?
About 10 years. Yeah, we're planning our 10-year anniversary in April. So we're gonna, I think, drive the Florida Keys is our plan. So,
oh, that's awesome. Yeah. My wife and
I
I went down there not too long ago. It's beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah. Still some storm damage around, but
they're
getting it cleaned up. Yeah.
Good.
So married for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So your wife, does she enjoy the spirit?
Yeah, she's gotten into whiskey with me as well, and she has taken on the role of being our primary bottler, our chief bottler. Her business card says Queen of the Bottles, and that she is. And so all probably 15,000 bottles that we filled in the 3 years we've been open, she's done by hand. So yeah,
that's crazy.
Very impressive.
Yeah. So when he says by hand, he doesn't mean like she individually loaded each bottle into the labeling application. Like she does it actually by hand.
The stickers, the labels uniquely by hand.
Yeah. And I've checked, and her labels are flawless. They're straight.
Believe it.
They are perfect.
You better believe it.
I don't know if you've ever tried to, because we do club stickers sometimes.
Yep.
I can't put one of those on straight to save my life.
Nope.
So
I mean, it looks straight the whole time, and the minute it touches the glass, you realize it's crooked.
It's crooked, and it's too late. You have nothing to do about it at that point. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So what was your path to getting into spirits production? You said you went to culinary school.
Yep.
What other jobs did you have before?
Yeah, no, I was out of college. I accepted a job with Dell Computer, and it was a big episode of Office Space for me. It really was, that Hawaiian shirt Fridays, and it was just not for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a fine company for a lot of folks, but that mega corporate environment, I just sort of, after about a year or two, just really rebelled. And I'd always enjoyed cooking. Didn't know if it was something I wanted to do for a living. I was pretty sure I didn't want to be a chef on a line somewhere, but didn't know if I maybe wanted to be a food author or critic or something like that. And always knew I wanted to cook, and was single at the time, and felt that it was a life opportunity that I could afford myself at the time.
Right.
And that really gave me the kind of really opened my eyes to the idea of just doing something creative or doing something with your hands. I really like the idea of working hard, and at the end of the day, having a physical product sitting there, having something to show for your work, versus the computers go down at work and then everything's gone and it's all in ether.
Right.
So love having that physical product at the end of the day. That's really what got me interested in beer. I interned in a kitchen at a brew pub that also was a restaurant brew pub that was also a brewery, and was able to intern in the brewery shortly thereafter. So that was.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 22.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, this was I worked at the Bitter End in downtown Austin in the year 2002. So it's almost 20 years for me now in this industry. So
wow.
18, 19.
And so did you work in breweries from that point forward after you did that internship?
Yep. So it's interesting. I've always been into beer. Never really thought I liked whiskey in most of my craft brewing career. It's very interesting. Finally had to figure out that bourbon is not my thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's just not where my tastes lie. I had also tried scotches, but also I'm not a big peat guy.
Yeah.
And so most blended scotches or most readily available scotches will have some peat in them probably. And so I didn't really think I liked scotch. It was a tour of American craft distilleries that are doing single malt whiskeys like Stranahan's and Westland that really opened my eyes. They're making whiskey like beer brewers make whiskey. They're using specialty grains and having more complex malt mash bills than just Golden Promise, for example, which is a fine malt. But we're doing a lot more interesting washes and mash bills, much more like brewers would do. And so it kind of took me making that connection from whiskey to beer and finding that bridge to whiskey from beer, essentially. And I feel that as I'm getting older, I'm drinking more whiskey and a little less beer every day. And I think that's probably going to be true of most of the craft beer guys and gals and people in this generation. So, if
nothing else, just to get away from the calories.
Yeah, for sure. As you get old, you can't process them as easily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel like your brewery background has influenced you to do things differently in whiskey than, say a traditional master distiller would do in Kentucky?
Yeah, good question.
Is there more emphasis like on fermentation or,
Yeah, I'd say both fermentation. We play with a lot more yeasts and different yeast strains, and then in the mash itself, in the mash bill. It's very traditional and malted whiskey and single malt production to use just one variety of grain. It might be a very nice, flavorful grain like a Maris Otter or Golden Promise or something like that. But we really took more of a brewer's approach and got a lot more creative. The conventional wisdom in distilling was that specialty malts or roasted malts didn't really carry over and provide much flavor. But we found that to be not the case at all. We found that specialty malts do carry forth. Like the color of them obviously don't carry through like they would in a beer, but the flavors do. So for example, if you use a roasted barley, you get those dark chocolate, coffee, roasted flavors in your whiskey. And a lot of those flavors are very complementary. So we're finding we're essentially brewing sort of kind of a strong brown ale that we then distill into our malt whiskey. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we'll play with those specialty grains depending on the variety as well. We might use a little more roasted malt in some of our smokier whiskeys because we feel the roasted character goes well with the smoking. We do all of our own roasting in-house as well. We have a coffee roaster that we do all of our own malt roasting as well.
Really? Yeah, I don't think I caught that on the tour.
I think we skipped that. Yeah.
So that
go back and check it out.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I made mention of it earlier. The regulatory environment for spirits production in the state of Texas is not very friendly. And in my opinion, the main impediment, and there are a lot of impediments, but the main impediment is the inability for you to make the best product that you can, use that great product to attract customers and sell it to them. Right. Because we do have the separation. We don't have the separation in the wine production in Texas any longer. And the separation has become less in beer. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that one thing is what makes this such a risky venture, that you might very well make the best whiskey that has ever been made in human history, and it will not matter if you can't find a way to get your wholesaler to get it to market.
Right.
So what on earth possessed you to start a distillery?
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. You listed some of the disadvantages we have
Sure.
over breweries and wineries. You know, some of the big ones that are really affecting us today are we can be open on Sunday. You can visit the distillery, but I cannot sell you a bottle on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday's a big tourism day. We get a lot of folks in and out of here. You know, traditionally, this law, you know, the argument is liquor stores, you know, don't need to be open Sunday because you can plan ahead and buy ahead. But, you know, when you're talking about a tourism day like Sunday, you can't plan a visit ahead. I mean, you're
Right.
going to be visiting that day or not. And so the, you know, that's going to be a big one for us. The limitation of 2 bottles is another big one. We've people often coming in wanting to buy a case, and we can only sell them 2 bottles per person per month. That's another limitation. And then finally, direct shipping. You know, the wineries you can come in and join a wine club, and they ship wine directly to your house.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a huge game changer for us as well. We've got people from all over the state and all over the country that are interested in our whiskey, mainly a lot of reason because of what we're doing right now. Yeah. Podcasts, YouTube channels, exactly. And so we really don't need the traditional distribution channels like we used to. I know our distributors don't want to hear that. You know, they're a protected tier. And, you know, more and more, I think, you know, we would probably not need, you know, them quite as much, you know, with the direct, you know, consumer interaction that occurs today between the consumer and distilleries. But there still would be a place for them, obviously, sure. Liquor stores. And, you know, we're not going to be making deliveries to every liquor store in Texas.
Right.
So we need them. But I think more of an equitable approach, like what is happening in the beer and wine spaces in Texas, you know, would be nice. You know, to be honest, though, we're happy with what we have. It's relatively new. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, these laws were passed allowing tasting rooms for distilleries. You know, before
you couldn't even give your product away. Yeah,
couldn't sell a drop. I think you were allowed to give away 1/2 of 1 ounce.
But there was a time that you couldn't even do that.
Perhaps, yeah. Drops even that. And so, boy, that's just obviously, you know, not sustainable. And so the law was passed as we were doing our planning for this. And had it not, this probably never would have happened, along with half the whiskey distilleries in Texas right now would not exist if it weren't for the tasting room law. But it's still definitely prohibitive of growth and expansion. And for sure, we would definitely do a lot better with Sunday sales and direct sales.
So you're sitting around one day.
Mm-hmm.
Did you already, because do you brew beer here as well?
We don't. Nope.
You don't? Okay.
Yeah, we would need a different permit, and then we would need different equipment as well.
Gotcha. And so you had all of this brewery experience, mm-hmm. right? And then you go, hey, I know what I should do. I should take part of my family farm and open up one of the most risky businesses that can be opened in the state. Like, what was that psychological process?
It was a big leap. No, for sure. You know, I had confidence in craft whiskey in Texas. You know, I got to spend 15 years witnessing, you know, that slow but continual march that craft beer and the growth that craft beer had mm-hmm. for all those 15 to the last 20 years. And, you know, it was pretty clear there was going to be some crossover in the spirits world.
Right.
And then we felt that we knew how to make fun and cool and interesting stuff. I feel that one of the most important things to do as a producer is to just step way back out of your producer role. It's very easy to make whiskeys that fit to your tanks or fit to your equipment or fit to what you can do, but really step way back out. And what would be really cool to see on the shelf? If I was, you know, as a whiskey nerd, if I walk into that store, what would I get really excited about? And so that's a big challenge for myself as well, is to really step out of the producer role and to get into that. But no, I had confidence, you know, and our ability to make a good product because of our brewing background. We've got about 80% of the whiskey production part nailed down. We obviously had to learn how to run a still. Right. It's a big part of this as well. And so that, you know, we had to do that. But I think we had confidence in what we were doing and where the market is heading. Or else I never would have done this. I tell people opening a grain to glass distillery is like opening a brewery making beer, delivering beer for 3 years, but never cashing any checks that you get. Because essentially we're making beer, we're processing it into whiskey, and then we just set it back into barrels for years. And so we got to keep making, even though there's no whiskey to sell. And so it's a tough business model. Yeah, for sure. We were lucky. We had very supportive wives with good jobs, and I live here on the farm. We're able to live, pretty cheap, and we've got a little bit of sheep and cattle money and coming in, not much. And, so yeah, that was it. It was definitely a leap.
Because you have a business partner, right?
I do. Yep.
Okay.
So Tommy and I worked at Real Ale Brewing Company. He ran their lab. He's kind of got the science background, and I was more on the process side in brewing and cellaring and distilling.
And so along those lines, you wanted to create a unique product. You wanted to not, just jump on the bandwagon. What are some of the production methods that you use that are not unheard of, but are maybe not industry standard?
Yeah, sure. Well, one, maybe not production methods, but styles, that we chose. We wanted this to do both tradition and innovation. We've got a couple of products, these two specifically on the left close to me, that are very tradition based. We're not looking to do anything creative or new. We really want to try to pay an honor and homage to a very traditional style, and then also then do something more creative, like what we're doing with Stryker. It's very traditional, for example, in the craft beer world, to take a traditional, often international or worldwide style, bring it home to your location and kind of make it your own. That was done with the IPA. The IPA was a mildly hoppy British style that Americans brought to the US and just made this over the top hop bomb and made it our own. And so that's what we did with Stryker. We thought if Scotch were originally made here, it was developed here, what would it be like?
What would we smoke it with? Right.
We don't have any peat. We use oak, mesquites, barbecue woods. And so, we feel that we have that more of a smoke, that kind of characteristic. We have a smoke flavor, and then also a new barrel. Since American whiskey is traditionally new barrel whiskey, that's kind of what the American whiskey flavor profile or palate enjoys, is that dark color and all those nice vanillas and oaks from the new barrels.
That's interesting.
So that's more style. Process wise, we are very traditional, and so traditional copper pot still. Very much like a Scotch distillery. So nothing very creative on the process side besides maybe the smoking and the roasting.
Well, there's a few things that you do that are super, maybe they're not unique for the style of whiskey that you're making, but they're definitely unique for American whiskey production. So one, you have your own smokehouse. I've been to a lot of distilleries. I've never seen that. And basically it's the Home Depot shed.
The duck shed.
That's got there's a smoke box on the side, and it's awesome because there's all of these smoke oils around the door frame,
the gaps of the
gap,
shed,
where the smoke gets out, and there's inside there's all of these trays with screens on them, so that the grain can be smoked. That was super interesting. And then you guys.
I guess the rainwater also.
The rainwater.
Yep. So we're off the grid water wise. We have electricity here in the kind of our rural location, but we have to collect all of our own rainwater and use that for all of our whiskey production. So that's pretty unique. I know there are distilleries using rainwater in the U.S., but we are exclusively rainwater. That's all we have, and so that is pretty unusual.
And for those of you who aren't from around here, water rights are a really big deal in this area of Texas. I mean, you'll see bumper stickers on cars about, different aquifers and things. And so it's really awesome that you're able to use rainwater for your production and not have to tap into, any of those resources that people are always arguing about.
Yeah, I agree. We're able to be self-sufficient. And, it kind of allows us to start with a blank canvas of water too. It's got a nice pH already. And then we can amend with minerals when needed. So we find that the mash is probably the one step of the brewing process and the distillation process that rainwater is probably not great for because of the lack of calcium and minerals, and then that transfers into the fermentation as well. So we'll augment our water a little bit there with calcium chloride, perhaps, but it's perfect for all the other steps of making whiskey because you're not.
So you cut with it, and
yep.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yep. We'll even process and cool with our condenser. So our condenser of our still has rainwater running through it. and it comes in cold, and as it cools the vapors, the rainwater itself is heated up. And so as your water leaves your still, your cooling water, it's hot. That hot water then goes into the next mash, into the next brew. So we're very efficient out here as well. Where our condenser is also our hot water heater. And so we don't have to then spend the time or the energy to heat that. We also do something that I don't think we really talked about in the tour very much, and that we've got a heat exchanger to flip batches, multiple batches in a day. So we'll do a stripping run in the morning. And after that run is done, what's left in your still in the pot is basically, non-alcoholic beer that's been stripped, but it's at 200 degrees plus degrees. So it's very hot. Can't dump it down the drain, really. A lot of distilleries just go home and let it cool off overnight. But what we'll do is we'll take another batch that we'll run later that day, and we'll run both of those through a heat exchanger. They'll pass heat from one to the other. They don't mix, but they exchange their heat. And so our batch that's already been run has now been cooled off, and then it can be spread into the pasture as irrigation, and it won't kill the grass at 200 degrees.
Right.
And then our second batch that will be run, instead of starting off at room temperature, it starts at like 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's already preheated 100 degrees before we start to try to boil it. So that's a huge energy savings for us as well, energy and time savings.
That's fascinating.
So yeah, we're very, very energy efficient here.
And your sweet mash as well.
Correct. Yep. No
so
backsets.
And you ferment. You do not ferment on grain.
Correct. Yeah. So like a brewery, we'll separate our liquid from the grain during the mash, right after the mash. And then so fermentation and distillation are liquid only.
And barrel-wise, you're using 53-gallon barrels, but different treatments to those barrels, right?
We're experimenting with different toasts, maybe like a heavy toast, light char. We're also doing traditional bourbon barrels, just regular number 3, number 4 char. And then some of our whiskeys are new barrel, and then some are used barrel, depending on just kind of what flavor profile we want. For example, our peated whiskey, we probably don't want to use a brand new barrel for that one.
Right.
Some people are making some cool brand new, barrel, new oak peated whiskeys. That's great, but we're really looking for tradition and want to stick with tradition on the peated whiskey.
So doing something like this is an all-out commitment, right? I mean, you're probably working 7 days a week, all of that.
Close to it. It's probably 6.
Yeah. So how has being in this lifestyle and trying to grow this business, how has that affected your personal life?
Yeah, it's interesting. It came in conjunction with a move out to the country,
right?
So it was even further isolating, really. But yeah, no, it's long hours. It's long days, long hours, and you lose touch with a lot of your friends and everything. And so no, it's definitely been a strain just moving out here, being away from kind of the core group of friends I had in Austin, and being an hour away, and then also starting a business. I don't return phone calls and emails very well anymore. There's just so many of them to return. I just can't.
Right.
And now I understand that. I didn't understand people who didn't do that before, but now I understand it. I empathize a little more now, and I try, but I'm not very quick often.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this would have been a huge change of pace for your wife.
Yeah.
What was the conversation like talking with her about like, hey, I want to risk literally the family farm on this crazy idea?
Yeah. No,
was she on board right away? Did it take some convincing?
She was. Luckily, she knew that she was marrying a craft brewer at the time.
Right.
And so she knew she was marrying a romantic and so who didn't care about making money. And but she was very supportive. I think the opportunity to do something of our own, that we can take pride of ownership in, I think was an exciting opportunity that we both realized. So it luckily wasn't too hard. And Tommy had been throwing around the idea of opening his own brew pub for a couple years, and so his wife, she said, well, shit or get off the pot. That's right. Do it or stop talking about it.
Right.
So that was his cue to do it. and we did it. Yeah, about late 2015. We started construction, and Tommy, myself, and one local guy did all of this.
Really?
We had the slab poured, we had the metal frame put up, and that was it. We've done all the wood, the drywall, the bar. We did about half the plumbing. We didn't do the electric, anything that required a license. We didn't do. But yeah, it was a real labor of love. It took us about a year to finish this place out. And so we wanted to make a nice place. We're out in the country. There's plenty of long neck bars out here. They're fun. They're good for their own thing. But we wanted a little bit nicer place that you could take a coworker or a date or something, for example, and be proud of. And so, but still be casual at the same time.
So I'm not sure a lot of people know this about me, but I used to have a furniture company that built cabinets and furniture. And so when I was walking through, you have a lot of reclaimed wood treatments on your walls and things like that. And every cut is flawless.
That's awesome.
Right. And so there's an archway that's just over here to the side of me. And I was looking at it and I was like, God, whoever did this.
Yeah.
I mean, really talented.
There's a great story about that. That arch is the exact diameter of a 120 barrel fermenter at Real Ale. And it is so because when those tanks were shipped to them, they ordered a bunch of tanks. The tanks were laying down. You imagine these big, 40 foot tall tanks. And they're maybe, 10 feet in diameter, 8 feet or so. And they're laying in cradles. And so what we did is we took those cradles and flipped them upside down and then just
made that the archway.
5 of those cradles are the form for the wood that's attached to it. So yeah, that's the exact size of a Real Ale tank of beer right there.
That is amazing.
Yeah. It's a funny side story.
I was walking through there and looking at how flawlessly every one of those joints was put together. It was.
Thanks. Yeah, that was fence wood. We got sections of fence, a various stage of rot and graffiti, and brought it all back and pounded the boards out and got rid of the nails and chopped the ends and. No finish though, no sanding or work on them, and I think it looks great. Yeah.
Now, if you don't want to answer these next questions, you don't have to.
Okay, no worries.
But funding for an operation like this, this is personal funding.
Yep.
Did you bring in investors? You get loans?
Yeah, so it's mostly a loan that we were given, a line of credit, and then we also brought in some friends and family investors.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 20%.
Okay.
So Tommy and I are the primary owners.
Wow. Yeah. It's just so much.
Still have lots of debt to pay off though.
Yeah. So much.
Haven't started doing that yet. So.
Right. Are you guys in the black yet, or?
Probably without debt payments.
You would
but yeah, probably so.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that when people talk shit about Texas whiskey producers. To my knowledge, there's only a couple of you guys that are actually making money, and the ones that are usually super small, and they're not making an amount of money that would impress any of these whiskey collectors, right?
Right.
And so it is a passion and labor of love, and you're building something for the long term, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure at some point in the future, Andalusia will be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but in the short term, you take on tons of risk. And you're usually risking all of your personal finances along with any other, major partners that you have. You said Tommy is your partner?
Yes.
Tommy. Does he participate in the operations?
Yes. Yep. Definitely. We're hand in hand. We do a lot of overlapping to make sure we have coverage here. We're open 7 days a week. And so we're here together, maybe only about 3 days a week,
right.
But we'll overlap on the other days.
So often what you find with these companies, if you're out there listening, is that if they had to pay themselves just like $15 an hour for the time that they spend working at the bar and making the product and doing all the things that they have to do, they wouldn't be able to afford to do it.
Yep. The only way we're even approaching profitability, which I'm still questioning we are, but is is lack of employees. Labor is just by far your biggest expense, and you don't really realize it until you start writing paychecks. And your paycheck always seems small, but when you write it from the other side, it's very painful. And so it's pretty much just Tommy and myself. We have essentially a full-time bartender position and finally a full-time production employee, which is relatively new for us.
Yeah.
That's allowing Tommy and I to get out and do a little more sales work in the field, But we were doing all the production for the first couple of years and about half the bartending as well. And that's tough. It's a very different life, working with the public and serving behind the bar, and then running the still.
Sure.
It's a lot. And it's hard to turn one off and turn the other one on instantly. And so that was a real struggle for me, is the kind of the social stamina required to work an 8-hour bar shift is a lot.
Right. Yeah.
You can be good at being friendly, but do it for 8 hours straight,
and you get tired.
Tough. Yeah.
And so who's your wholesaler?
Yep. So we're with Republic. We switched to RNDC in June, and they're going to help us kind of get all throughout the state of Texas. And so
right now, where are your products being sold?
Yep. We're available in Total Wine and Specs, not Twin yet, or Goody yet. And then probably a good couple dozen independently owned liquor stores across the state. And they're the well-known ones. It's Empire in DFW. It's Alamo City in San Antonio. And it's South Lamar and the Wine Merchant in Austin. So, they're really those retailers that really want to make sure they have an excellent selection, got us pretty quickly. And then we're working on some on-premise accounts now too. So we're in some cool restaurants and bars and hotel bars and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're also a member of the Texas Whiskey Trail, I believe, right?
We are, yes. Yeah. So we're a founding member of the Texas Whiskey Association and the Whiskey Trail. And so really proud to be a part of the formation of that. And, since we're grain to glass and we've never sourced any whiskey, we've got a great story to tell. And so we love questions, and so we've got nothing to hide, and we really obviously are on board with pushing things like transparency and honesty and truth in labeling,
right?
Because our truth is great. So yeah,
right. So, and that's, if you haven't seen my interview with Spencer Whelan, that's basically the purpose of the Texas Whiskey Association, is to spread the word about the true producers, what they're doing. And the story is a good story. It's not Kentucky's story, but we're not trying to recreate Kentucky South.
And it's not a judgment call either. We're not at all saying that grain to glass is better than source whiskey or anything like that, but it's all about truthfulness and transparency in labeling.
Sure.
So if you're going to source Kentucky bourbon, great. Just don't call it Texas whiskey.
Sure.
That's kind of the stance that the association takes.
Sure.
Say it's a wonderfully carefully selected batch from Kentucky or Tennessee or Indiana, and tell a great story about that. You're missing an opportunity to say that if you're faking Texas whiskey, I think.
Sure.
And so you can be proud of what you're doing instead of trying to be somebody you're not. Basically.
Right. And manipulate the public.
That's more important.
Right.
I think Texas is such a valuable marketing brand or icon, whatever you want to call it. And if you put Texas on any product, you're going to sell more of it. That's fine. But, if it's actually a fake Texas product, I think most Texans are going to take issue with that if they really get to the bottom of it.
And it's technically illegal, but there's no enforcement of it. So
none whatsoever. It's not an FDA product. It's, there's really no government oversight. The label approval process does not at all ensure, customer integrity. There's nothing to protect the customer at all. And that it's all about proper taxation is the only thing that the labels are really concerned about. And so even having a approved label doesn't mean it was approved for honesty, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I did a instructional video about labeling regulations, and I was able to walk to my closet and find 2 bottles that were improperly labeled to use as examples. It's super common. It's
a staff of folks at the TTB that are approving labels. So there may be, 30 or 50, 100 of them. And so it's just who you get processing your application. They might accidentally, approve something they really shouldn't have. Or maybe you get somebody that's strict and they're going to have a very, strict interpretation of the regulation. And so you never really know.
Yeah. It's just a roll of the dice.
Yep.
So how many years are you into this? 5 years?
So yeah, about 4.5. Distilling about 3.5. And the tasting room has been open a little over 3 years. We opened September 1st of 2016. So we just had our 3rd anniversary party about a month ago or so. We're excited. Well, all of our whiskey is now at least 2 years old, probably about 2.5. And we're really kind of trying to eventually target about 3 years for all of our whiskeys,
Nice.
a minimum.
At a minimum. So of the four principals that had to make the largest commitment to open this up, you, Tommy, and both of your wives, if you had now, because often when you go into an endeavor like this, what it turns out to be like is not actually in alignment with the romanticized version that you had in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now that you have the knowledge of what the work to be done ahead actually is, do you think any of the four of you would decide not to do it if you had to do it over again?
Definitely not. No, we would definitely do it again.
Really?
Absolutely. We've been lucky. We've got some really good whiskey to market pretty quickly, a lot maybe faster than we thought. We've gained acceptance from whiskey groups and YouTube channels and bloggers, and then we got prominently featured in a recent Texas Monthly article about Texas whiskey, and so all that really positive feedback is really energizing us right now.
Sure.
Because it's been 2 to 3 years of we really didn't know if this was going to work. We can make all this whiskey, but until it's time to go sell it all, really, maybe this was been a bad idea the whole time,
right?
But we didn't know.
Did you hear that, people? Like, that's the truth.
Yeah.
You invest millions of dollars before you find out whether or not it's even a viable business opportunity.
And you've got 3 years worth of whiskey sitting there that's unsellable perhaps or whatever. Or maybe you were making a technical mistake in your distillation for years that you didn't know about. It's something you don't really pick up until the whiskey's aged. And so all that were fears that we had. Sure. Absolutely. Is this whiskey going to be any good? Are we going to be able to sell it? We have a long way to go in promoting the brand and selling our whiskey. Mm-hmm. We're probably selling about a fourth of what we're making right now. Mm-hmm. So that's why the whiskey continues to get a little bit older, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But we're just about ready to sell as much as we're making. So that means we need to sell 4 times as much like today. Right. And that's not going to happen, obviously. And so we need to grow the business. And so we're getting into the sales side, and so sort of if you want to go from what my fantasies were to what my reality is, the fantasies are you're hanging out with your buddy, drinking beer, barbecuing, making whiskey all day. Right. That's the fantasy, right? That's what you think you're going to be doing. And you do a lot of that. And it was a lot of fun. But now, I'm knocking on the doors, cold calling liquor stores, and they're not very friendly,
Right.
And so it's not nearly as much fun. But, we still get to come back and do brews and distillations and everything. We're still very hands-on. So whenever we're missing that, we can still come back here and work. And so that's not a problem. Tommy and I still run the still 3 days out of the week when our employees have the days off. So, yeah.
So then my follow-up question to that would be, if you would do it again, what are 1 or 2 things that you would definitely have done differently?
Probably structure a little different financially. Probably go get more bank loans. We don't have any bank loans. And so we sort of have a line of credit through a broker. And so it's very flexible and a great interest rate, but we should have got a construction loan for this building, for example, that would have freed up other money. So we probably should have sought more financial help to have a better blend of loans and liquid cash, basically. Mm-hmm. So some financial advisement.
Running it a little too tight on the cash flow.
Yeah. We bought everything with cash. We built the building with cash, and I already own the land, so that wasn't necessary. But it's easy. It's much easier to get construction loans because they can always foreclose
leverage the building. Yeah.
And so we would have done that, that would have freed up all this construction money. So that's just something quickly I can come to mind. I probably would have waited. We did some soft distribution. We've been distributed for a couple years now through a much smaller distributor, and that was probably a bad idea. It paid the bills a little bit at the time. We've always sold a lot more whiskey here in the tasting room than in distribution, but that extra bit of income was nice. But you really don't want to have product out on a shelf that you can't support. I had no idea how much the liquor stores and the distributors expect us to sell our product. They want me to be in the liquor store as their salesman. I didn't think they would want me in there. I thought that would be annoying to them. But they want me to be in there. They don't want to hire salespeople. They want it to be us. And so there's a lot more of that side than I really expected, how much that we would have to do.
And my argument is that the fact that there are even brand reps
Right.
means that the three-tier system is not performing its function.
Correct. Because the distributor should be doing that, or
Right.
the retailer should have more interest in new products and things like that. But the retailer has been so force-fed sales calls for so long that there's very little effort being usually put forth from the retailer to go find new things or bring new products that might be interesting to their customers. That's what I figured a liquor store owner might be doing. But they're just so bombarded by sales calls all day from distilleries and from distributors, and so unless you got that sales force out there, you're just not going to be well known. You're not going to be known about. So all the whiskey nerds know about me, but none of the liquor store owners do.
Right.
So that's sort of our problem that we're facing now. And so we just need to get out in the market and shake hands. And so we got whiskey into markets, maybe into cities in Texas that we didn't have the ability to go and visit and shake hands with those liquor store owners.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot more likely to sit on the shelf and collect dust. That's just the facts. And so if no one's there supporting it and selling it, then they're not going to know about it.
Right.
So we probably wouldn't have got into distribution before we could support it with Salesforce. That's another probably like you could call it a mistake or something we do differently.
Yeah. So my final question, if you could wave a magic wand and make anything happen for the future of Andalusia, because I assume that you're working towards a goal, right? So if you could wave a magic wand, what would Andalusia's future look like?
So I can definitely see one step. We always laughed that we started with Andalusia 2.0. This is a lot nicer than most startups.
Yeah, sure.
And we lend a lot of that to our brewing experience. We felt like we already knew what 1.0, what 2.0 looked like. We could just go ahead and skip 1.0. And so, 3.0 is going to be, much more of a whiskey playground and a Disney World for whiskey fans. And we'll much more tightly integrate it with the farm. So you can come out, we've got a pretty good tour now, but we really want to integrate the farm and much more of a kind of walking experience, so that you can, right as the grain comes out, you can see it being fed to the lambs and the sheep and pet them and be a part of that. And so we'd really like to more fully orient or combine the tourist experience with the production experience out here. And really have that destination come out here and spend all day kind of.
Do you want to have like cottages that you rent out?
That's part of it. Yep. Probably, somewhere to stay, food perhaps. Tommy and I have both been in the restaurant business, so we're smart enough not to get back into it. There's no money and all work, and everybody's a critic, and so that's tough. So for now, we're doing food trucks. So yeah, I'd love to have an integrated kitchen, obviously, so we can, be creative and do pairings and things like that.
So would you be distributed nationwide, ideally?
Ideally, we're grain to glass, and so there's only so much of our whiskey, and so it would definitely require an expansion to get out of Texas. We've only got a couple thousand cases to sell every year, and that's just all we have. We can't order more or buy more. It takes a couple years for it to be made, and so there's a finite level of growth, and that is sort of nice. We can aim at a target that we don't feel like we're going to miss. We don't feel like we're going to fall short of that target anyway, because we can't really get any bigger. We can't be Tito's, even if we wanted to be.
I guess my question is it so Balcones as an example?
Yep.
They had a small copper pot still. At some point they expanded. They have the biggest fucking pot stills. They're gigantic
in America,
right?
Perhaps, definitely in the state. Yeah.
And so is the idea to stay true to your, production methods? You don't want to convert to a column, but you do want to increase production. Do you want to have giant pot stills? Do you want to have big barrel aging warehouses? Do you want to?
Yeah, no. We're never going to be 100,000 cases. I'd hate to say that we say that we're going to remain as small as we are now. That's definitely not the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see at least one or two expansions to something like that size of a Balcones. Before it really is, our roles here will probably be done at that point.
Yeah.
I'm
that's
not
somebody else's problem.
I'm not the guy to grow to Tito's for sure. No, we're more of the creative force, and those are always different people. the person that starts the business and the one that takes it to the world for sure.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we'll be ready to hand it off at that point. We're not looking to sell out. Don't worry. But yeah, no, we want to make sure that exactly we would have to, all steps of growth would have to maintain, all the product integrity. Absolutely. There will be no growth, until we're ready to do it well, for sure.
Awesome. So if people want to find more information about your product, you mentioned some of the retailers that you are distributed through. You have Facebook,
we do, yep.
Instagram, all that stuff?
Yep. We've got a fairly weak Instagram, really good Facebook, and our website is AndalusiaWhiskey.com.
Awesome. And I would recommend that you guys come out here for a tour. My wife and I recently went out to the Texas wine country. And while it's tons of fun to go to all of these wineries and taste their great wine, and if you haven't gone recently, the wines have gotten much better in Texas. I came out here 10, 12 years ago, and it was almost undrinkable. And every place I went, I found something that I liked now.
Yep.
But there's a couple of nice whiskey tours out here as well. You can go to Garrison Brothers. You can come over to Andalusia.
Yep. You can do 4 or 5 within half an hour of our location here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So for sure. And if you want more information about Bourbon Real Talk, you can reach us at bourbonrealtalk.com, Instagram and Facebook /Bourbon Real Talk. And you can search for us on YouTube. And if you've ever had any love or affection for me at all, I would love it if you would subscribe and review on both YouTube and whatever podcasting platform that you consume podcasts on. Even if you're not going to listen every week, the algorithms really love it when I get subscriptions and reviews, and it will show the podcast to more people. And if you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anybody loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.